Good evening. This is the Art Scene. I'm your host, Lila Snow. Tonight, I want to talk about my new obsession, 90 Day Fiancé. It's actually very timely because fear of cultural displacement played a role in the election. And the diversity in this country has really switched to a totally different mix. Well, in 90 Day Fiancé, which is a K-1 visa, you're allowed, an American is allowed to have someone from a foreign country come for 90 days as a fiancé, and then you have to decide to get married or the potential spouse has to return home. So this really points up cultural differences. In fact, it starts with Shakespeare, who in Hamlet has two gravediggers say about Hamlet, the Prince of Denmark, he's mad since birth, so they send him to England where his madness won't be noticed there. So the point is, when you're in another culture, you don't notice the quirks of somebody, so you can pass for somebody that you're not exactly that person, and somebody with defects can pass as a reasonable person because of the cultural differences. Well, there are pretty much three categories. There's the expected older man going to Thailand, the Philippines, Haiti, for a young wife who is going to be an old-fashioned wife, make that a servant who cooks and behaves like wives used to behave. There are some glaring, obvious, bad combinations like Mohammed, who's 28, who comes from Tunis, is brought over by Danielle, who's 42. And one of the big differences that's very noticeable is people in foreign countries tend to really care about what's called in Italy la bella figura. Even if you're just going out for a loaf of bread, you make sure you look nice. Americans don't exactly worry about that. So when Mohammed comes and Danielle's son walks her down the aisle wearing flip-flops and shabby shorts, the difference, the cultural difference just screams out at you. And yes, indeed, it doesn't work. There's screaming, there's throwing things, and that's a sad story. The other sad story in that category is Annie and David. You wonder, what can she be thinking? She comes from Thailand. David is 42, and he comes to her village. He has 3 grown children who don't know anything about this. He doesn't have a job. He doesn't have any money. And oh, by the way, he happens to be a drunk, and he's a nasty drunk. So he comes to the village.
Before Annie and I come to America, we will do a traditional Thai engagement party in her village. I'm extremely stressed and worried because the mounting costs of marrying a Thai woman is beyond my expectations, and I'm running short.
I need to know how much for the dowry. Not what they're wanting, but what they're okay with now.
So what you can do now?
50,000 baht right now.
If them say no, maybe our relationship is broke up.
And he doesn't know how to behave. He gets drunk. And it's just, you feel like shaking Annie and saying, what could you be thinking? But the way I got totally seduced, there are 2 couples that were so crazy that I just couldn't resist. The first is Anfisa, a Russian who flips her hair and keeps saying she's gorgeous, so she deserves nice things. And she comes from Russia. This is another big difference, is in the foreign country, you can usually get around. If you're isolated in an American city where you need a car and you're not allowed to drive, that can be very hard to take. So she comes to LA for George, Jorge, a Spanish-speaking family, and he thinks he could never get such a gorgeous girl if he didn't go overseas. So she's isolated in the LA apartment. He has 5 sisters, none of them take her out on an excursion. So you think, what's going to happen here? Well, the first thing she does is have George take her to a bridal salon. She doesn't look at the dresses. She walks in and says, "What's the most expensive?"
What is your most expensive dress?
Our most expensive dress would be $45,000.
And asks, how much of a down payment do you need? $20,000. Well, George sells weed and always has a lot of cash, but he doesn't have $20,000. Also, she goes to look at an engagement ring and wants a $100,000 engagement ring. So there's lots of slamming doors. She leans forward to show the cameraman her cleavage. She won't allow the cameraman in to listen to the fights. They fight, they separate. She moves to a hotel, and then when last heard from, they're actually back together again. He is so smitten. Oh, and did I say at 20, she's already had her lips plumped 5 times, and she's going for Botox. The other couple that I couldn't get over was Nicole and Assad, not the president of Syria, Assad from Morocco. So Nicole goes, she's one of the earlier couples. She goes to Morocco for a month, and she's totally insensitive to a Muslim culture. He keeps telling her, I can't kiss you in the street, we can't share a room, I can't hold you around. And she says, I thought he would want to show me off. She thinks she's so gorgeous. And he wants her to go to the gym every day and not eat fast food. And he doesn't understand. Well, they then have to give up because she doesn't have the money to sponsor him. Her father agrees to sponsor him. And so she goes back for 2 months, this time with her 2-year-old daughter, May. And that child is totally ignored. She never talks to her. She never plays with her. There's no book. There's no toys. There's no crayon and paper. They go to the beach, and there's no pail or shovel. The child is just sitting going like this in the sand. And Nicole says, whatever you do, don't take her down to the water. You take a 2-year-old child to the beach, you hold her hand and let her splash. So that now they're fighting, and that looks pretty hopeless. So I thought, well, with those 2 couples falling apart, maybe I should give up. But then, voila, arriving on the scene is Andre from Moldova. And he's now living in Dublin, and he is a punch in the face.
Andre is very stubborn. He has 0 patience.
Don't feel me, come on. Nothing scares me, like, I'm not afraid of nobody.
He doesn't know that I find him intimidating and don't tell him, but he is. He can be, you know?
She's nervous about his getting the visa because he's an obnoxious bully. And so she wants to rehearse, and he taunts her, and he won't rehearse, and he says, so what if I came 10 years ago on a tourist visa and I overstayed my visa by 6 months? That was 10 years ago. Forget about it. So she's terribly worried, but he must have behaved because he passes. And but he's going to tell her she can't go out with her 3 sisters. Her father and brother don't like the whole thing. So I'm continuing to stay with it because I have to see if he can control himself, and when she decides the red flags are really alarming. There's also one other couple, because you get the feeling you're not being told the full story sometimes. In this particular couple, I feel there's something we're not being told. So the one thing they have in common, this is David from Granada, Spain, and Evelyn from Claremont, New Hampshire. So here again, we have being in a city where you need to drive, he's not allowed to drive. Coming from a culturally rich city like Granada, he's 28, she's 18. She thinks that travel is something you get out of your system and then you settle down. And he's had time to do that. The one thing they have in common, they both belong to very strict Christian churches, and they both say they're virgins.
Before the wedding, David is staying at Pastor Tim's house. Pastor Tim has a close relationship with my family, and they have a special little apartment off their house for him. And it's because we both have the same conviction that we don't want to sleep together before we get married.
I share same convictions with Evelyn, the idea of purity until marriage, and we try to not put ourselves in circumstances that would make us be tempted to each other.
He has to pay for his 6 groomsmen to rent tuxedos. So this is a little crazy. She wants a profession as a singer, but she doesn't want to leave Claremont. She needs to go to a bigger city with the recording industry. Anyway, to be continued. I'll see you next time on the art scene. I'm your host, Lala.